Good morning and welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be doing a tier list based on the new cards that were released for 9.6. When they first came out, I did a reveal video where we talked about maybe where some of the cards are going to be suitable, which ones I thought were strong, which ones I thought were going to need some work, and the results are in. I'd say we have plenty of time to play with these cards, and some of my opinions change throughout the course of the month. So I want to cover that today, and I think it's really important, especially if you haven't had the chance to play with these cards, maybe to prioritize which ones to craft first and so forth. So let's get into a tier list here. I'm going to be doing it offline just so you don't have a bunch of tacky pop-up ads and stuff like that. Also, I couldn't make the background on Google aesthetic, so it was too bright. But anyways, we'll drag them into the respective folders. I'll pull the result after for you guys to see. So we'll start off with Hemmelfart, and honestly, great card. So far, I've really liked the card design. I think it's nice and clean and simple, easy to understand, and it's not overtuned, and it certainly plays for its provision. So with this one here, we're profiting 4. Great for Firesworn because they don't have a lot in the way of profit cards, so I really like that off the get-go. We're able to spawn and play Congregation, so it's going to be adding 3 tokens, which is great, right? So already it's playing for its provision, but then the spend is really cool as well. So destroy an allied Firesworn token, so we're basically taking away one of the ones that we spawned for a price. And we're able to pull something from graveyard to the same position. So that's really cool because a lot of the Firesworn decks worked around the Fallen Knights and things of that sort. Being able to bring them back gives Fireswarm 2 solid rounds, and I think that with all the buffs to other factions and other archetypes, this is really good for that almost forgotten archetype being Firesworn. So I think that this card is honestly top notch. I think if you're interested in playing Syndicate Firesworn, this is going to be in that auto-include category in, I would say, pretty much every case, right? It's just that good, but it's not overtuned to the point where it's broken and it's breaking the game and you know, it's causing people hard times and we hate it, right? So I think that one goes in the A class. Certainly an amazing card, and we'll leave it there for now. So moving on to the next one, we have Ardol. So Ardol, you basically deploy it on ranged if neither player's passed and your opponent's hand's not full. Move a non-doomed enemy unit with the power up to the number of tactics in your starting deck to your opponent's hand and draw a card. So I like the fact that it acts as a consistency card for Nilfgaard, and I kind of like the fact that basically you can take something that the opponent played and maybe boosted and put back in their hand. Now, I think this card's good, however, I think it's very expensive, and I think it does have some conditions. So obviously we can get a pretty big ceiling on it here, but the problem is, you know, what are we going to put back in their hand that is not boosted, that doesn't have a, like, it has to be boosted to a certain point, but not over the point. It can't have a deploy effect that's going to work negatively against us. So it's one of those things where maybe you put like a tutor card back in their hand, or you put a bronze card that's like an engine that maybe accumulated points throughout the entire round back into their hand so that they play it last say. But I can't see it getting as much value as some of the other hero cards that were introduced, and it's one of those things that you can only really play if you're going to be playing heavy on the tactics. So you're going to be playing this in Enslave, otherwise you're probably not going to be playing this. And for that reason, I don't find it gives me enough creative flow with, you know, using this card in other decks. I would say that this one's probably more of a B tier, to be honest. And moving on to Yan Calviet, you guys know I put out a couple decks in the last month, and I was a real big fan of this card. I wasn't expecting it to be this good, but I really like it. So sort the cards in your deck from the highest to the lowest provision cost at the start of the game, move self up by 1 position in your starting deck for each tactic. So this could be played in Enslave. I tried it in Enslave 5, it worked perfectly. You could play it in Enslave 6, sure. Any Enslave is really fine. But I actually just put out an imprisonment deck guide. If you guys haven't seen that one, check it out. I put it out yesterday. It's the longest deck guide in the world. It's like 2 hours and 50 minutes long, and I played a deck that only had 5 tactics, and we were always pulling into Calviet. So that's one of those things to consider. Very versatile card. It brings back Masquerade Ball and relieves a big problem of consistency, and you don't have to be running Rodericks and a bunch of cards like Joachim just to get your cards and have to rely on these random pulls. This will just sort it out for you. So I think that this was highly underrated when it came out. I've read a lot about people thinking it wasn't a very good card, but I think the opinions of most of, the people that maybe thought it wasn't that great changed, and I put this one right up there in A tier because this card's very good, plays phenomenal for its provisions. I don't necessarily think it's overtuned, I don't think it needs a buff at all, and I don't think it's game breaking, so it's going to be an A tier, okay? Moving on right now to Arrakis Queen. Deploy consume an allied unit if it's an insectoid spawn and play an Arrakis nest. Death Wish spawn a base copy of the consumed unit to this row. Now, this card is another one that's phenomenal. Now, monsters right now is probably, I want to say, the second or least played faction. It's between that and Northern Realms, I would pretty much say at this point. And I don't think it has to do with this card at all. I think it just has to do with the supporting archetypes not being as good as maybe some of the other ones like Skellige, Syndicate, Qcento, etc., right? So, with that being said, this card is really good and it has so much versatility. Like, you could pretty much put this with any monster leader and figure something out, right? It doesn't have to just be a Death Wish deck. I made a guide for a video that was like an Arrakis Swarm deck, and it worked really well with this card here. So it allows you to make copies of monster cards. I've seen the double Detlefs, I've seen double, triple Bloody Mistresses, right? All types of cool stuff. So if you're into just having fun playing around with a card, this isn't a meme card. It's pretty serious, but it could be used in that direction as well. And I think the card design on this is awesome. I don't think it's broken. I think it's just right where it should be. And I probably wouldn't change a thing. There's an argument that maybe 11 provisions is good, but I think 10's just pretty good as well. I'd probably put that right in with A tier, okay? Now, moving on to King Hensel. This card got a little bit of attraction because of the nerf to Rafford's Vengeance, right? So being able to play a crew unit from your deck, and then whenever an adjacent unit's cooldown decreases, boost self by the same amount. So the problem here is that this will act as a tutor for Rafford's, but there aren't really a lot of other crew units that you're going to want to pull from deck. War Elephant could be one, right? Or otherwise it's a bronze that you'd be able to get with Amphibious. I think a lot of the reason why people would play this card is for the second effect, being whenever an adjacent unit's cooldown decreases, boost self by the same amount. Now the problem is, it's very easy to work around a card with 3 base power and 1 armor. The fact that it's 13 provision when some of the other cards are doing much more for the meta for much less cost, I don't think that this is one of the better cards right now. And I think that this card arguably needs a provision buff if it's going to stay competitive. So I wouldn't be surprised if this card goes down to a 12 or an 11 in the coming months, just because I think it has the potential to do really good things for Northern Realms. I just don't think that it's doing as much as it can. So with that being said, I think it's a C. Now, King Bran's going to be the next one here. It has Veteran, and that's really cool. Be 7 base power round 3. So boost self by 0, increase the value by 1 whenever excess damage is dealt to enemy units. At the start of the game, I'll make it full screen here. At the start of the game, trigger the Veteran ability of your units. So it's not necessarily going to be played for the deploy effect. More than often, you'll see when this is played in round 3, for example, maybe it gets 1 or 2 boost. If you're really trying to play around it and build a whole deck around it, maybe it gets like 5 or 6 boost, but it's never like a huge point slam like a Gourd. But with triggering the Veteran at the beginning of the game, you have so much more value in all these bronze cards that otherwise you might not play. So the Tursic Invaders, the Raiders, you have cards like Turgvi that are very prominent right now. It does a lot for the Skellige Warriors archetype. So, and Pirates as well, right? Because some of them are hybrid cards. So that's pretty much why you have it. Because if you think about it this way, you're playing the Raiders, probably both of them twice. And you're playing the, potentially if you have cards in your deck like War of Clans, you could be playing those Invaders twice, right? There's a lot of really cool things you could do there. So you're getting those extra points twice, more or less, within just by adding this card. And priced at 11, I've seen much worse, right? That's actually very affordable it does maybe compromise you throwing in maybe one more removal or something like that, or you can't necessarily jam in, let's say, Iced, Fukusha, and Herald, right? You got to pick two. But again, I think it's really good balance for the game, and I think it really helped make Onslaught and Pirates especially that more attractive to play. So with that being said, I put it right in A tier. I think that's great. Now let's move on to some of the more controversial ones. Not to say they all are, but some of them are. King of Beggars for starters. So this card here, fee 1, boosts self by 1, so it's an active spender. While in deck, whenever you pay a tribute, remove a counter for each coin paid. For each removed counter, gain 1 coin back. When the counter reaches 0, summon self from deck to a random allied row, counter 9. So really, all you gotta do is take a tribute of 9 coins throughout the course of the game, and this will auto-summon itself. So you're getting basically a refund for everything that you've spent, which is crazy. If you think about playing cards like Savola Frightener that cost a tribute of 9, assuming you're not running off the books, right? If you're running any other leader, you're getting a 9 tribute for the Savola Frightener. The fact that you can play the Savola Frightener, get 6 points off Savola, 12 points off the Frightener, get the full refund, bring this card out of your deck, and then pump 9 coins into this card is just game breaking. It's very unhealthy for the game, and you see basically the cost of 10 provisions when this is arguably the best card that they threw into the whole expansion. So to me, that's a big problem. And, you know, for someone who likes Syndicate and liked Syndicate before it was cool, like, don't get me wrong, I enjoy playing the card because it's nice, it feels good to win games, but I don't like playing it at the expense of everybody else's fun, you know what I mean? So with that being said, that just goes right in the S tier because it's just busted, and you're going to see a change. Like, it's not like I talked to CDPR, but I just know that they're going to be changing that, and it's probably going to get maybe, I think it's going to get a provision nerf. If they don't feel like reworking it, I think it's going to be just a provision nerf maybe of 2 or something like that. But even then, the card design is questionable, right? I think that they should actually do a rework for this card in case you shouldn't be able to get exactly what you spend back. I think it should be a diminishing return of some sort, or it doesn't thin from your deck or something like that, so there's more risk of pulling into it, right? Or something like that to really disrupt it, but we'll have to see what they come up with there. Now, there was a lot of controversy around the next one here, King Radovid, when it came out, but that was just surrounding this card being playable with the Uprising Leader ability. However, that was sort of a game-breaking bug, so to speak, so that was hot-fixed, and I talked about that in a former video, but with this one here, being, you know, the way it's supposed to be played now, you're able to get an additional charge for your leader ability, and on the order you get another additional charge. So you're going to be often seeing this in decks like Inspired Zeal, or you're going to be seeing this often, probably most often currently, in decks like Shield Wall. And it's essentially adding a couple leader charges. Now, what are those leader charges worth? Well, it really depends on what you're using them on, right? It can make a huge difference if you're playing something like Shield Wall and you put a shield on your Selkirk and you get like a crazy duel from it. But then if you put like a shield on something that isn't very good or just for points, it's only like a 2-point shield. So I think for that reason, because of the conditions that play around the card and whatever leader you choose, this card feels pretty balanced, right? And the deploy is nice. The order is something that this has to survive for. So the opponent still has a good opportunity to remove that, and it's only 6 power, so it's certainly possible. If they feel like they need to remove that, and it's one of those things that they could lose if they don't, then they'll take care of that, right? So I'd say it's pretty balanced at this point. I think it's a great card. I don't think it's like overtuned. I don't think it's exceptional. When I say exceptional but not game breaking, I'm thinking A. I'm thinking this card falls somewhere in the B tier, to be fair. And moving on to the next one, here we have Milva Sharpshooter. Now, I can't even make a deck guide on this. You guys don't even want to see this. I think we've all seen enough of this card. So it has Zeal and it has an order. Damage an enemy unit by 2. On Death Blow, we can shuffle it back into our deck. and whenever you move an enemy unit, summon self from your deck to the opposite row and damage the card that was moved by 1. So you can imagine that this thing just runs full circle all game long, because you're playing it with guerrilla tactics, you have tons of cards that can move, and it's tough. You know, it plays really well into like a low unit or no unit, and if the opponent's playing engines or whatever have you, they're going to have a very difficult time really getting anything started, and this could just pose for something very toxic to play into. It's not a lot of fun, and I think it ruins the dynamic of the game, and it makes a lot of people not want to play, right? Some of you guys have voiced your opinions saying, I'm tired of this. Like, it makes me just want to turn the game off for the month, and I'm with you on that one there. Now, it's not overtuned to the point it can never be dealt with, but it just pushes the game in a direction that I don't think is very fun. And for that reason, along with its strength, I'm going to put it in S tier. But the game-breaking part is really kind of what I'm leaning towards. Like, you know, cards that definitely need a change. And I don't know. Like, it's one of those things where if this was play-tested more, then they'd be able to see the frustration of playing against this card time and time and time again. And if it's as strong as it is, everyone's going to play it. So realistically, you should put someone on the computer, tell them to play 10 games against the deck with Milva, and see how they feel after, right? And so it goes in S tier. Now, this was the first one that I played of the new cards. Regis Reborn. Deploy, drain an enemy unit by 3 at the end of your turn while in hand or deck. If there's bleeding, like enemy with bleeding on it, right? Increase own base power by 1. So here's the thing. It's 13 provision. It's right up there with Hensel for provisions. Now, the tallest that I think I've played this from hand was maybe 16, which is very good for a last say, don't get me wrong. It was 16, and then I drained 3, so it boosted itself to 19 and took out... I mean, it's a 20-plus point play card, but the problem is you're playing it in monsters, and you have to draw it. Now, we know that Devotion monsters has a little bit of an inconsistency problem when it comes to pulling some of your cards, right? Relying on Naglfar, which is looking at 2 random gold cards, and then you're able to draw one of them and put the other one on top of your deck kind of thing. And then you have thinning packages like the Wild Hunt Riders, not as good as a deck running on Neuromancy. So this card, I would want to play non-devotion in order to fit that in there, right? Just so that we have it. But a lot of the vampires, with exception to like the Fletters and stuff like that, they like devotion. Like the Unseen Elder really likes devotion, and some of the surrounding cards, obviously in the bronze end, like the Conquerors, just really inexpensive cards you could throw in for monsters. A lot of these cards like devotion. So, you know, I like the card. I think it's a great card. I don't think it solves the problem that vampires have. I think that the Fletters are really good support for this, and I think that they're often putting in more work. Because the problem with this here is that you slam it for points, but if you don't have last say, this probably will be answered and you still lose the game. So it really depends on winning round 1 to get a good Regis, and I think that there might not be enough support for it right now. And although vampires started off really good at the beginning of the season, I'm not sure how I feel about it compared to some of the other decks that are more prominent in the meta. Now, like I said, it's not a bad card. I don't think any of them are bad cards. I just think that we have to have some sort of structure here, and I think that that one deserves a B. Now, looking at the next one, Saskia Commander, this is really cool. So it has immunity, and deploy if you have at least 10 different primary categories in your starting deck. Not primary units, but categories within your cards. And for whatever reason, I was playing a couple decks and nature didn't work, but all the other ones were working just fine. So summon a random bronze Qcento unit with a primary category that is not on your side of the battlefield from your deck to this row, right? And then it's just a counter of 3. So this will repeat itself throughout the course of the round. So you can imagine if it's a 10-card round, you're pulling out a few cards, you're getting deck thinning, you have immunity, so you can't manually target this. You have to put in specific tech cards for it, which it puts the opponent in a position where they have to build a deck a certain way to answer one card. And that's unfortunate, right? And every Qcento deck right now pretty much is going to be trying to run this card if possible, just because it's really nice to be able to pull tons of cards out of your deck. It's going to make sure that you get all your gold cards later, right? And there's not a lot of people can do to answer this, and usually the cards that you're pulling out are going to be engines that are just accumulating so much value, and this is just a passive thing on the side. Meanwhile, you're playing cards from hand, and that's the dangerous part. So this makes it very difficult if the opponent has this card in round 1 to actually come back and win that round 1 against your opponent without overcommitting, right? And even then, it's sometimes difficult. I think that this card's good. I don't know if it would like require a change necessarily. I just think it's very strong, to be fair. Especially with Skellige, the 10 different categories are not too hard to achieve there. Maybe you're putting 1 or 2 cards you normally wouldn't put in your deck to make it work, but again, it's not changing everything drastically. So for that reason, I'm putting this in S tier, but I don't necessarily think it requires a big change. I just think it's a very good card. And Cirrus Fearless, this one here, have to say it was a little bit underwhelming. After you've dealt damage to allied units 9 times, summon self from your deck to the ranged row. It has Zeal, and the order is to fully heal an allied unit and damage another allied unit by the amount healed, with a cooldown of 1, so you can use it basically every single turn. The problem is, you might just be able to use it once, right? It's 4 base power, anything can remove that. It's not difficult at all to remove this here, and from the experience that I had with Skellige, normally 9 times out of 10 you're running like a discard package, just because the discard package packs so many points and it helps cycle out your deck and get so many cards going out. And you pull into this more often than you'd like to pull into it, so you're always looking to mulligan it back, or you're not taking mulligans in fear of pulling out Cirrus Fearless. But when it eventually summons itself, assuming that you don't brick that, then you have the ability to heal something and damage something by the amount. So you have to have a board state established already, and something damaged enough to really care about healing it, and then something else that's going to benefit from damaging it. So it's a very conditional card, and then it doesn't really have that repeatability because, like I said, you do it once, the opponent sees how effective that was. Let's say I have a Blue Boy Lugos that's 1 power, and then I have like a, what did they call them? I play with this card all the time. The one that when it gets to 3 power, it heals itself. You know which one I'm talking about. Let's say the Blue Boy is 1, and then you heal that, and you damage the other one by 5, or okay, we'll say 2 base power. You damage it by 4. It heals itself, right? Huge swing. That's what I'm getting at. There's a huge swing of play. When the opponent sees that you've accomplished that, they're removing this card immediately. So anyways, with that being said, I put this one at the bottom. I literally put it down there with Hensel because I think it's really cool, but I don't know if it even plays for 10 points half the time, is what I'm trying to say. It gets the deck thin, sure. I don't think they need that support necessarily. There's so many ways to do it with Skellige, and like I said, the effect of it is just a little bit conditional here. So we have our S tier, which consists of these 3 cards. We've got our A tier, which are these 4 cards. We've got the B tier, and there's nothing wrong with B, right? Bs are playable cards for sure. And I didn't put D and F because I didn't believe, you know, that it was at that point. And then you got the C tier, the ones that maybe need a little bit more attention, right? Maybe can get a little bit of support. And let's just see how. So my opinion has not changed because I wasn't looking at this when I was putting together the video right now. I was doing it just kind of if I was looking at it again. Now, let me know what you guys think of this. Is my analysis fair? Would you guys change any of these cards right here? Is there something that you think I'm missing? And if you were to change some of them, what would you change? I don't know if... I don't think I would change Saskia, necessarily. I would change Milva. I think Milva, if it had like a devotion clause, then you'd be able, there'd be limitations to how many times or different cards you'd have to put in the deck in order to set it up. So then it would be a bit more fair. I would say devotion would be a really good fix to Milva. And King of Beggars, I think that maybe getting a refund of half or up to, or once 9 have been spent, refund 5 or refund 4 perhaps, like something that's not 9, right? And then maybe a provision nerf to like 11 could be suitable for this card. I think that's fair because you're getting the thin, you're getting the profit, you're getting the spender all in one anyways. But refunding all of them's, it's the refund initially that's tough, right? I think it should be you spend it, then you get it back once it's all spent. Because if you're taking little tributes along the way, right, normally with this, as it currently stands, you're getting paid back. These cards, I wouldn't change. Regis, I might give it a provision buff, maybe 12. Radovid, I probably wouldn't change it either. I think it's fine. And Ardol, I think maybe a provision buff. I would say maybe like an 11 would be really, really good without breaking it. Hensel, I think a provision buff would be fine. Either provision buff or maybe like another armor or one more base power. One of those two things, or both. 12 provision, 1 power here or here. And Cirrus, I think, that's tough. It's just the archetype itself isn't as great right now. I'd say provision buff, to be fair. I think if this sat around like a 9, I know they're all heroes and all, but I don't know if this is really like a hero card. And the reason why is, like I said, it doesn't work too often. Yeah, I think like 9 provision would be really good for that. At least it would help it out and be able to allow you to fit more good cards in the deck. But what I'll do is, like I said, post a link in the description for you guys if you wanted to go in and try something like this. And again, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. We will see you tomorrow with another deck guide. I've already got something started and it's going to be great.